It's time for a review of Squid-Cowards. Cowards is the third album from the indie rock juggernaut Squid, who've just made waves over the last sort of 5 or 6 years with incredible releases. None better than what I consider their best is their last release, Oh Monolith. The band experimenting with different kinds of glassy synths throughout the album. So we got the opening track, which was the first lead single off the album, Crispy Skin. It starts with that mid-tempo thing with the glassy synths and Sonic Youth-like guitars in the second half of the track. This is a real highlight, and I can see why they made this the lead single off the album. Second of all, you've got the Building 650, which has these expressionistic lyrics alluding to something sinister about this character called Frank. You don't quite know what it is. There's a lot of obscure lyrics throughout Squid's discography, so what you'll find is that quite a lot of the time they're alluding to something that we don't fully know what it is, and we're living in that ambiguity of not knowing what the lyrics are about. And that's the space that they operate in a lot of the time. Blood on the Boulders, again, it's this sinister past memories only being alluded to. You get snippets of some horrific event that's happened in the past, but it's never explicitly explained. The build-up to the refrain, we want to know, it's just masterful. Again, it's highlighting the use of atonal guitars and strings. This is a really good track as well. Fieldworks, parts 1 and 2. The build-up is really great in part 1, and you feel like it's going to lead into something like huge. But in the second part, it kind of falls short a little bit for me. I got really amped up for this being probably the centerpiece of the album. Kind of seemed like it would have been, but it just kind of felt underwhelming to me. But Cro-Magnon Man, this is a treat. It's got an irresistible groove with this bass line and backing vocals. It's probably the catchiest track on Cowards. Even though it doesn't have a chorus like sort of the other Squid tracks, it seems to reveal itself melodically within the verses, which is a really interesting move to make. There's that dissonant feedback-laden guitars in the background, setting up this really eerie atmosphere that they're well known for. You got the title track, Cowards, which is a slow build, and then it had this forlorn horn part that comes in the second half. The third act centers around another sort of refrain, and we put the pellets down and we work around the town, repeated several times. They quite often emphasize a lot of the power of repetition in music. You see that a lot on this album. You see it a lot throughout their discography. This track was a pretty good track. Not great, but it's probably in the middle of the road track. Showtime is a very interesting track, and it harkens back to probably the earlier Squid work. But then in typical fashion, about 110 into the track, they drop this John Frusciante style funk riff that comes in and just takes you by surprise. It's just like flips the whole sound. And by the time you get around to the 2-minute mark of the track, all these choppy sort of bit tune synths start coming in, and it's like gone in another direction altogether as well. And it's amazing. And that's one of the things that Squid is really good at is making these little movements within these tracks they've done. And that's where their strengths lie. Admittedly, the band's spoken about making a more streamlined sounding album, but where their strengths lie is in the erratic nature of the arrangement. And we see this on the Showtime. It's actually the best track in the album. And the closing track, Well Met, Fingers Through the Fence, finishes off the album in an epic display of restraint and builds into an unbelievable crescendo, leaving you wanting more. So I think, it's not a really short album, it's not a long album either, but I think at the end of it, I sort of wanted more of the best bits of it rather than sort of the whole. So, as I said, I will be going back to a couple of the tracks on this, and while I don't find it as good as Oh Monolith, there's still a bit to like, and I'll be going back to these tracks, probably in isolation, and adding them to a playlist. This is by far maybe their most underwhelming release, but that's not condemning it too much because there's such a high watermark for them. So I like it quite quite a lot, but it's still, for me, as a complete set of songs, it's still misses the mark a little bit for me. So I rate Squid-Cowards 6 out of 10. And until next time, I will keep well, and we'll see you in the next one.